Microphones on. We'll get started here at 7 o'clock, Wednesday, November 2024. All members of Planning Commission are here. We first have a public hearing. Call that meeting to order. Agenda shows amendments to Title 11 of the Woodland Hills Municipal Code and some changes to Title 10. Title 11, for the record, is the state early this year passed new legislation having to do with applications for subdivisions. And they're mandating a couple of alternatives for cities to take. Reading between the lines, developers have had some challenges with some cities apparently throughout the state in getting subdivisions approved in a timely manner. So this new legislation gave some mandates. It gave some alternatives that cities could pick in trying to streamline the subdivision approval process. They even, the state contracted with some individual companies as well as a couple of attorney firms to help cities draft the changes to the chapters that needed to be done. The larger cities were required to have this in place earlier in the year, and smaller cities such as ours have a deadline of the end of the year to have it in place. The city hired a company that's associated with Jones and DeMille to draft the changes to our chapter, or to our title rather, and basically what we've chosen to do is to combine the preliminary plat and the final plat with one application process. And that was, there were a couple of options that the state gave. It wasn't completely up to the cities. And so that's the option that we chose, feeling that it would be more closely aligned with some of what we have done in the past. So so that's what was put out there for people to look at and provide comment on if they chose to do it. We haven't gotten any feedback from anyone. I've provided copies to you of what we got from the company, and we've made a few changes to those to better tailor it to what we wanted to do within the confines of the legislation that the state legislature passed. But it will put it all together. We're not lessening any of the requirements. We're just combining them into one process, and it'll be one application. In essence, it'll be the final plat that we get from a developer with all of the criteria that we before have had with both the preliminary and the final plat applications. So I think it'll be kind of a heavy lift for the developer, because they'll be required now to provide the information at one time instead of breaking it up into a preliminary and final plat applications. But I think in some aspects it'll be a lot smoother process. Another requirement that the state put on cities was the timeliness of the application review. And with the new legislation, we have 20 days to review it and approve it. And it will not go to the city council any longer. The planning commission will be the land use authority for that. The city council will handle any appeals that a developer might make, but the approval itself will be done by the planning commission. We will still put it through a technical review before it gets to the planning commission, as well as sending it to our contract engineers, Jones and DeMille, for their analysis and review before it gets to us to look at it and review it and approve it or disapprove it if that's the case. But hopefully by the time it gets to us, with all the dialogue we've had with the developer, it's anticipated that it would be approved. Another critical component is when the developer gives it to the city, it must be a complete application. If it's missing anything, that our time does not start until everything that's supposed to be provided to us has been. So there won't be the back and forth as much as we've had in the past in some instances with taking something and it's been incomplete, go back and try to and get it back and forth. We won't accept it until it is complete with everything that's supposed to be provided. So that's Title 11 for your information and for the record. And Title 10 has to do with three things. We define what a wall is in our ordinance, where heretofore we have not had that definition. And there's one part of it that we need to change the wording. It refers to a building inspector when it should be the building official. That's in the language of our existing Title 10. And the last thing is adding a section on retaining walls. Again, our ordinance was silent on that. It had walls in the title of one of the sections, along with fences and a couple other things, but it really didn't address walls anywhere in the ordinance. So we've put a definition in there, as well as section on walls, retaining walls. So unless, Brian, do you have any public comment that you choose to make on any of those things?
No public comment.
Okay. Robert, give you an opportunity if you choose. You don't have to, but the opportunity is yours. Okay. With that then, and there being no more public comment, we'll close the public hearing for those items, and we'll discuss them further in our business discussion. Go ahead then and go into our regular meeting agenda tonight. We'll call the meeting to order. Lori, would you offer an invocation for us? And John, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, John Stout?
You bet.
Okay. All right.
Our Father in heaven, we come before you at the beginning of this meeting and ask thee to please bless us with thy spirit. Please help us to have open minds to be able to discuss the issues before us today, and please help us to best represent the citizens in our community. We are grateful for the homes in which we live and for the good friends that we have here. And we ask thee for thy help, and we say this in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen. Thank you. Invite the audience to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the business agenda, item number 5, approval of September Planning Commission meeting minutes. We didn't have a meeting in October, so September is the last meeting we had. Those were sent out, and I think Larry made a couple of corrections to it, which all of you should have gotten a copy of.
What about number 4? Wait,
4,
number 4.
I'm sorry. You forget it. Public comment. Robert, any public comment you want to make about anything? Tell us how things are going at home, whatever.
I just think that's what we've done with public hearing. Down to kind of the concept plan before the final plan.
The concept plan is still allowed, yes. Good, thank you for bringing that up. I don't see any other hands raised, so thank you. So we'll move into item 5 then, of the September 18, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes. For a motion on that.
Move we accept minutes. September 18, 2020.
Okay,
I'll second that.
there's a second. Severin, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item is a request for zone change on 4 different parcels of property. Robert, if you can come up and take the microphone here and just let us know a little bit about what you're proposing. Push the button on there too to see if it's green and it's on for a recording.
Reed Nelson came to me and wanted to know if I could help him get one of his properties ready so he could have a grandson build down there. Next to the church by the cul-de-sac, or the roundabout. And he says, I think you might have to rezone that, do what you want to do. And he says, should we just go ahead and do all of them while we're at it? So I did. We submitted all of this property that he has. And I added a piece of property that I have. We wanted to rezone it to the R119 zone. We just have those 3 properties that you have.
Okay. What are the development plans for any of those?
Reed has
Fine.
nothing at all planned other than he wants 1 lot for his grandson there right next to the church. As far as mine, I just thought I'd add it in while I was doing it because eventually we'd like to do a few of those pieces of property right there together when everybody comes together and wants to do it all at once. That includes Gideon Olson, Robert Olson now, isn't it? Gideon Olson, Corey Colonel Hyatt, my parcel. We have a concept plan we drew up for that. We're going to do it in 2007, 2008. We decided to wait for that recession. After that, everybody kind of decided to just hold and wait a little while. So there's no immediate plans on any of that because nobody agrees on it while we're in the process of doing it.
Okay, so the only one, I put this thing together for planning commission members. Up there, you can see those two separate parcels. They're divided by the road that goes over to the salt shed up the top, Severin.
Is R1-21.
Yes. And those are, and then the other one, just a little bit to the west of that, the AG, that's the other parcel that Reed and Sally Nelson own. And then one off to the furthest on the left side, that's the one that Robert owns over there to the west of his, of those that have been developed into 4 seasons. I don't think those lots are laid out exactly that way, but that's generally where the area where his 5 acres is over there. So Robert, is Reed, which one of those two is he looking to build on? The one by the church?
Yes, it's lot number 1. It'd be just south of the church, facing Woodland Hills Drive.
There's two, I've got 2 of them there, one to the north and one to the south, and it's the furthest to the south?
Just south of the building, of the chapel.
It's just
Okay.
part of,
Right
just part of
there.
that, not the whole thing.
This one right here. Okay, and that's the area right there that he's, so that's actually in that other parcel, Robert. That's on the north side of the road that goes to the salt
Correct.
shed.
It's directly south of the chapel.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Is it likely he would be doing that next year sometime, possibly?
He wants to start as early as he can in the spring.
Or, okay. Good to know.
Or no,
I know it's Brandon's son. His name's Logan.
And I think Jody has talked to maybe you, and I'm not sure if she's talked to Reed and Matt, that it'd be a 1-lot type subdivision that he would need to do for that particular lot until the rest is
Yes,
divided, but
yes, and the rest of it, Reed doesn't have any intention of doing anything as long as he's alive. He'll probably leave it to his children to do something with.
Okay.
You know, he may want to break some more off for some of his grandkids eventually.
is what he is requesting a rezone, is that the total of his property that he has in that area?
He has those 3 parcels, and that's all that I know of.
Okay. I didn't know if he had any more or not there, so,
And we just decided why he was doing it for that one. We just will try and do it for all of it and see where it goes.
okay. Are they gonna continue to farm the other in the
Yes.
meantime, like he has been doing?
Yes?
Okay. Very well. Any questions that any of you have about the rezone? Now, this is, all the people that, there's a requirement for the city to notify all the people that have property surrounding these. And that's been done. They were told that there's a meeting tonight, our meeting, to consider this. From us, this will go to the city, and the city will hold a public hearing, not us. The council will hold a public hearing when they get this back. I don't know if they're gonna, I think they're planning on doing it in December.
I think I heard the 12th.
December meeting, yes. So that will be the sequence, and we'll go back to them with a recommendation from our meeting tonight, the city council, and then they will take it up from that point. So are there any questions that you have of Robert, or anything you want to ask him from this? Pretty straightforward. There's always been talk of the lower part there having an R119 zone in it. It's a little more dense housing. And that's kind of what the city has projected in the past, to have more dense housing down in that area instead of acre or 2-acre lots. There's pros and cons for both. I think there's advantages to the city to have more dense housing and increase the number of houses and resulting in income and property taxes that would come into the city that way too. Most of it, there'll be a few development challenges, but a lot of it is in the flat land with the Hanks property and others down there. So I think that'll remain the primary issue with the size of the lots. Now, with it being R119, they can't be smaller than 19,000 square feet a lot. They can be larger than that, and that will kind of be up to the developer working with the city, make those determinations, but most of that lies with the developer and what they choose to do, so.
Which means they're in half-acre lot size, right?
It'd be just a little less than that big. Yeah.
About 0.44.
The other thing, you may all be cognizant, was attended the Utah Valley Home Builders Association meeting 2 weeks ago. There is a lot of push from the state to make cities and counties do away with lot sizes and home sizes.
Downsizing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it may, I mean, it looks like if powers that be that influence legislature, a lot of developers, then we will no longer be able to limit, say, a house has to be at least square.
Some of that's in there now.
Right.
So,
But it's spurring the governor's push for affordable housing.
it is.
Well, and a push for duplexes, fourplexes, all sorts of small apartment
Yeah.
type.
What they're finding, from what I understand too, is promoting that is they're finding kids as they go to school and get married, the housing is like nil
Right.
here. And so they're leaving the state, going other places. And I think the state looks at, they've invested in these people with schooling and things like that, and they'd like them to stay here if it's all possible to do that. The jobs seem to be here, but housing is very, very hard to find. So there's a big push, and we're kind of unique in a lot of respects to that, but we can help out with that too, and I can see the interest in keeping families around and whatnot, if it's possible to do that.
So that new development, I don't remember the size of homes. The old Davis place.
Oh,
Three Bridges.
Three Bridges,
Three Bridges.
yeah, they're smaller lots, but they're luxurious homes, yeah.
What are they doing with the great big pile of dirt there?
Just storing it,
Just storing it?
Yeah,
not gonna be moved.
they plan on using it for their roads that they're gonna be building in their development. And I think they're selling some of it. Somebody wants it. They're selling their topsoil
Oh my goodness.
that they had stored there. I think they've still got some, but primarily it's storage. And they've bought that property,
Yes.
so that's their property now.
It looks like they're filling in the valley, but
It
they're
does.
not.
Well, they are, but only temporarily.
Temporarily.
Yeah,
They were gonna build that whole area.
Yeah.
and you wonder,
Slope instead of.
then he thinks that's going to be our new sleigh hill during the winter.
Oh.
That's where you get on the new gondola that goes up.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
That would be a good base for it.
Yeah, yeah.
One question, does Woodland Hills have a zone for retired housing?
We do not. We've talked about it, and that was kind of a predecessor to the R119. And it seems like at the time there was some discussion, and that there was some added state requirements that seemed to be problematic in a 55 and older community type thing. So they decided not to do that, but to do R119. I don't think that's out of the question, but there was some,
Well, is
Yeah,
that, and
it's-
also your overlay zone too, kind of took that place too.
yeah.
We're kind of all just 55 and over anyway, so.
Yeah.
And we have an overlay zone with the R119. the
That's what I was saying.
Mountainville overlay, yeah, which allows for fourplexes. So forth.
You do have one that allows for
I
fourplexes?
think the Mountainville overlay does.
Does it?
They have to be a certain way. I better, before I misspeak, I know there's duplexes, and I thought there were fourplexes involved with that too. I have to look and see.
And that's an overlay that you put on the R119?
Correct,
So it'd rezone it to R119, then if you had an overlay, we'd bring it in after that.
yes.
Glad you came.
I am. Always glad to be here.
Any other questions that we have? Anybody? Okay.
I don't see it affect anything in the city, really.
I'll take a motion on item number 6 then to pass on to the city council for the rezone of those 4 properties to R119.
Make a motion that we approve this and are ready to pass it on to the city council, change the zoning to R119 for the 4 pieces of property.
Second.
Okay. Good, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. That'll be our recommendation to the city council then, Robert.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next time, bring ice cream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep those maps or can I get it back?
Do you want it back?
In case I need them for anything?
Let me keep one.
That'd be great.
Okay.
And you can keep them.
And I can,
So you gonna take your topsoil screener over there to help screen all that topsoil?
Well, they called me and I was going to, and then I told them how much they had, if I wanted Lisa, you want,
I do, yeah.
and they went and got one.
Not a bad idea.
We lined them up with some cells though.
got their own.
Hey, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Okay, next item on the agenda is the changes to Title 10. Those, I've outlined those in a little, on a little piece of paper that I sent to you. The first is the definition of a wall, and this would be added to our definitions in 10.2.1. It said, a wall outside of a structure is a continuous barrier made of rock, cement, blocks, wood, or other material meant to retain dirt or other organic substances. They are by name considered to be retaining walls. And then I thought it would be best to clarify, a wall is not a fence, nor is a fence considered to be a wall. They each stand on their own definition and construction requirements. So that'd be the proposed definition of a wall in our ordinances. So it's not cast in stone. If you think that there's some changes that need to be made to that to make it better, we can certainly discuss those. So that's what I'd like to do, open it for discussion on that, your thoughts.
One question comes to mind. I have seen retaining walls with the top portion being a fence. So like the bottom 4 feet is retaining wall and dirt is behind it, but the structure has continued up, and so the top part was a fence.
And our ordinance allows that.
Okay. I know that we talked about having a fence atop, or, you know, at the top of a retaining wall. But this, what I've seen is a continuous, you know, that there was not a separate fence, but the retaining wall was the lower part, and then the fence was the upper part.
You're saying it was like a block, a CMU retaining wall, and it continued past the dirt,
Yeah,
a CMU or wood or whatever.
I think in some, I'm trying to think our ordinance, I should have brought my book in, but it seems like in some instances, a fence is required on top of some retaining walls from a safety standpoint.
like the one on
Down at the church,
Adams,
Adams too.
between the
Yes.
Adams and the Warrens. 'Cause
Yes,
there's that huge retaining wall and then there's a fence
Fence
on
on
top
top.
of it.
I think it has to do with fall hazard.
yeah. Now, a wall that's more than 4 feet tall, we require engineering for that retaining wall. If it's under 4 feet, then there's no engineering required. It can be built without engineering. So that's about the only thing that we address in our ordinances having to do with walls. But we've gotten some feedback from builders wanting, well, can I put a wall in there? For example, can I put a wall along the front of my house? A wall is a wall. Some could look at that and say, well, that's a fence. And get into some semantics. We're trying to clarify things as much as we can. And that's why I've said in here, a wall is not a fence, nor is a fence considered to be a wall. They're treated separate. Somebody can't come in and put a 6-foot wall in the front of their house on the street. So,
Well, they can, but they don't have.
well, potentially they could now. We don't have anything that says they can't.
But a 6-foot wall, even now, would have to be engineered.
It would. Yes. Fine, I'll engineer it.
So even if they built a 6-foot wall that was really a fence, if they say it's a wall, it has to be engineered.
That's right.
Yeah, and structurally, they should be anyway.
Yes.
I mean, anything over 6 feet, they're gonna specify a footing, they're gonna specify footing depth,
But not
But
a
my-
fence.
but not a
Not a
fence.
fence.
I mean, if it was really a fence,
And that's, again, why I've included in here, those,
it's retaining something.
yeah.
Dirt,
I like this. Down in St. George or those areas, we built block fences all over. They're engineered. You got
Block
steel,
fences
oh,
or block
yes.
walls?
they're fences.
they're fences.
They call them a block fence, but it's an engineered wall.
Do they
And it's
retain?
engineered like a wall, not like a retaining wall. But there's engineering.
In
Yes.
southern Arizona, when we lived down there, our fences were concrete block walls, but they weren't retaining anything. They were a fence.
Okay. That, we need to address that.
And that's one of the questions that I have when we get to the fencing part. Because up to this point, we have not allowed a concrete fence, only concrete posts.
And isn't that because mainly it's for the site or it's for the visibility through the fence?
That's one
Well,
of it.
that's up on top, or in here, but down in Four Seasons, I don't know why we couldn't have a block wall down there, a block fence.
Good point. 'Cause we allow solid. 'Cause they have those
Down
solid
We
PVC.
allow
Down
solid
there.
fences down there. I mean, you drive up Woodland Hills Drive and there are all those concrete block fences.
Summit Creek, right?
No, I'm talking about Woodland Hills Drive,
Down.
down in Salem.
Oh,
Yes,
oh,
yeah.
oh, okay,
All those
yes. Oh,
developments
yeah,
that,
along the road, yeah.
you know,
See,
that
those
were
are
concrete block
pre-engineered walls.
Fences, or not concrete block, but they're
Yeah.
concrete.
My son calls that the Great Wall of Salem.
Like,
I mean, and I don't know why down in Four Seasons they couldn't do something like that.
in
If
the
they
ways they
wanted to.
kind of have with that composite fence, it looks very similar.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah,
just
and
lighter weight.
that's what Ryan had brought up before, is that we probably ought to have a composite fence as an approved material as well, because it really is different from a vinyl fence.
yeah.
And I actually did some research after that last meeting to, just so I understood what a composite fence was.
And that's, when we get the fences, I've tried to incorporate that option that it's not locked into a particular name or several names. It's kind of what it's, there's some flexibility there. with it. So, do we see a problem with, now, this is a wall we talk about.
I like the description of it,
It meant to retain dirt.
and it is. It
So we wouldn't have one generally along the front of the property because that's not a retaining wall. Then it's maybe a wall, but not a retaining wall, a wall fence. I guess that's what I'm kind of struggling with a little bit. We don't want that. We want to keep the front
Well,
open as
I
we,
mean, the fencing ordinance already says it's gotta be 30 feet away from a road. So you can't have any kind of a fence except 42 inches.
okay, so if we have a block fence, it still can't be along, our ordinance does say that it can't be, it has to be 30 foot back from,
from the
okay,
road.
okay, so that's addressed there.
Does it have to be retaining dirt, or could it not be retaining?
It's not retaining. Doesn't fit our definition of wall.
Why? How?
I mean, you look at like Milliken's house.
Yes,
Now that is an engineered retaining wall.
Where at?
Milliken's, or
Milliken.
ELS.
one and
down there by, do you know where Orms live?
Yeah,
It's next door
okay.
to Orms down further.
And there actually, there's one
Oh,
retaining wall and
yeah.
another one on top.
Where
Okay,
she-
but so
a
what if-
step.
Adams have one too.
What if someone built that, but it wasn't retaining anything? How would it not fit the definition? 'Cause
If
it
it's
says,
not retaining
Then it's a
anything, then it
fence.
wouldn't be a wall, it would be a fence.
Yeah,
And they couldn't put it on the front of the property like
yeah,
that.
I hope.
Well, as much as we
see,
control
the
it.
definition here says it is meant to retain dirt.
Do we need to say it will
It
retain
must, or it needs to be, it needs to be a retaining.
other material to retain dirt? It's not
Just
meant.
leave meant out,
I think so.
wood or other material to retain dirt.
Because we're gonna have, so a lot of these lots where the slope drops off the back, they're gonna want a flat backyard, so they'll build a wall. That's what Millicam basically did for his driveway and things like that. So the lot becomes more usable.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's what Milliken's did.
Yeah.
They put those two retaining walls so that they had a driveway to go up to their garage.
They did it so they had access to that lower garage without having to go down. They had it flat. That was a flat lot.
Yeah.
Well, if we take meant away, or we leave it in? Meant doesn't mean it has, well,
That's it. It doesn't mean it has to.
yeah,
We want it has to.
well, other material to retain.
So what are the other organic substances like? We're just trying to cover,
I'm just, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you never know. I guess.
they might decide to put walnut shells behind them or something.
Seriously.
there any way that this wall can get confused with the wall in the house?
That's what I said, a wall outside of the
structure.
structure.
Okay.
I got to think through that a little bit.
Is there
how
any
to-
way
how
somebody
to
can
Adjust that or
adjust
make
that?
that.
Yeah, because there's several times, we're seeing it now, there's houses in Summit Creek that are retaining directly off of the foundation. Comes out around it,
Oh, yes.
there's a couple of those.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. But it is outside still.
Yeah.
That-
So you think that's good for definition of a wall, to add to our definitions?
Hey, Wayne, do you want my input now or at the council meeting?
Whichever, no, go ahead
Oh.
now.
I figured you would. So I did have a couple of questions. One actually, when Severin was talking about, and you were talking about the requirement, some retaining walls are required to have a fence on there. I think you might mention that a retaining wall that is, not including a fence, a fence on top of a height, so we say that it can't be more than 42 inches high or 4 feet in height, whatever it is, not including the any fence that might be on top. As we brought that up, and also in here twice you've said may, so you put a building permit may be required to construct them. Do we want to change that to must have a building permit? And then there's another may in here as well about the engineering, and may be required. Trying to remember where it is.
Well, I
Uh,
want to require a permit for a 42-inch fence.
Well, this is exceeds for.
Any
Oh, this is
fence
the
needs,
4 feet.
except,
I'm talking about walls, retaining walls which exceed 4 feet in height may require engineering for stability regardless of their composition, and a building permit may be required to construct them. Shouldn't we say if it's 4 feet in height, it does require engineering for stability and must, yeah, and require a building permit?
I actually think there's a code that requires engineering and an inspection.
Well, my concern is that there are like what we call the Lego block retaining walls
Mhm.
that are engineered just the way they're constructed.
Correct.
Requiring a separate engineering report.
Yeah, but you're not gonna get a separate engineering report, but you gotta make sure that it's put in right. I'll send some pictures to you about one of those guys.
Yeah, so when I have built similar things, and I if I am installing a trailer on a foundation in a plant that I'm working a project right now where I'm doing that, they require from that trailer manufacturer certain code and engineering to be done. And that has to be part of your building permit. So if you're buying a pre-engineered wall, that design and installation specifications should come with that and should be required to be submitted. We can't just assume that this precast block is engineered. We need to know that it's engineered. I could be wrong, but this is what I've dealt with mine. I've never dealt with the precast blocks before. But that's what I've done when I've put pre-engineered buildings. I actually have that engineering because they keep it on file and they're actually certified, and they have to have things like ASTM numbers and stuff like that, that we can fall back on and say, okay, it has been engineered to this standard. And that's what I'm required by some cities. I'm working in Long Beach on one, and that is those are the things that are required by the planning commission before I can get a building permit to actually install these as permanent buildings on a site.
Yeah,
And that's
the city does
based on
that too.
specifications of whoever has manufactured those blocks.
Correct.
Yeah, and
It's
and
not
some,
separate.
Yeah.
right, you're right.
Yeah,
Some
Yeah.
of them come with them and some of them don't. So like you can go to Parsons and buy those block. They'll load as many of them in your truck as it'll hold. There's no engineering requirements on how they're placed. And that's where we need to be specific about. But then like Millicam's is a system. So it's actually built to lock and to certain requirements of, mesh and gravel and things like
And I
that.
don't know whether you know this.
So that would be simple for the city, but
But they blew it when they
Yeah.
first built it. They had to do it again.
it didn't have the right base under it.
Yeah.
Had a sag about 3 foot sag.
So, and that might answer the question why we keep may in there on the engineering, but I think a building permit, shall be, is more of a shall than a may on building a retaining wall.
And what
That's
if these-
over 42, that's over the 4 feet, right?
the may gives the city the option,
But who
Right.
makes the decision at that point? Is it
the
is it
city
you?
engineer. No.
Okay, the city engineer.
City
Okay,
engineer.
fair enough. That answers my question. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Because we run across that from time to time, and there may be, most of the instances, yeah, it's going to be required. Not necessarily a building permit all the time. Somebody wants to put a landscaping thing in, and they come to us, and so there's some variables there that the city considers, but I think the may
Okay.
is helpful to
I-
have.
I hadn't thought about that, and I implicitly trust our city engineer. So, I that answers my questions. Thank you.
And if they come with, if they're a standard kind of thing, and say they're 5 feet, 6 feet, we do require, say, well, we want the engineering behind that for our records to have. So we do require it in those situations, so.
Perfect.
Okay. Now, we talked about item 1 there. Then in item 2, retaining walls which are adjacent or parallel to a street frontage of a structure cannot be more than 42 inches in height. So we reaffirmed there that retaining walls can't be more than 42 inches tall if they're in front or adjacent to the street frontage.
And also we have, does it reference anything with the site requirements if it's on, yep, there it is. Never mind. Right at the bottom, number 5.
Okay.
The corner lots, the site obstruction.
Yes. And number 3, walls over 10 feet in height must be terraced, with each segment being no greater than 10 feet in height. And I took this from another city's definition. Fencing atop of retaining walls shall adhere to the fencing section of this code. Further terracing shall not be required when retaining walls are constructed for the purpose of providing support for external basement stairways. That was taken verbatim from, I can't remember if it was Salem's or Springville, one of the big cities here in Utah County. I took that from their ordinance on walls. It seemed to make sense, the way that was worded, so I didn't change anything. Item 4, walls must have a 4-foot circumference around fire hydrants and electrical boxes. That's the same requirement we have for fences. So they have to give 4-foot clearance. And then 5, corner lots. On corner lots, a site obscuring retaining wall or similar may not extend into the front setback area and clear vision area of the lot as defined in this title. So that would go in under the code 10.11.3D. It's be a new section on retaining walls. Yes. Thank you. That's the printer's fault. So are you good with that verbiage? Under retaining walls? Okay.
I don't know how picky you need to be, but when it says you must have a 4 foot circumference, should it be 4 foot or more?
How we define
Yeah.
the site and screen retaining wall?
Maybe it must have at least
Yeah.
a 4 foot circumference. So if they want to have a
No, no.
5 foot one for whatever reason,
No, on 5.
on 4.
I'm saying on 5.
The circumference is number
What
4.
is a site and screen retaining wall? Something over 42 inches? Did you have a retaining wall that was 42 inches high in the clear vision area?
Technically, you're not even supposed to have landscaping that's higher than a certain height in those areas as well. Just walls or fences.
I mean, we allow
That's
it
42
now.
inches. We allow landscaping, but isn't it supposed to be a certain height? I mean, I've had that.
I don't think there's a restriction other than clear vision area. For
Those areas
landscaping,
it's-
shrubs and hedges,
You'll plant a bunch of blue spruce in that area that's scrub.
yeah.
So
So like a split rail fence, 42 inches high.
But you can see through, well, it depends
Yeah.
on how close the rails are, I guess, but that's fence.
So we're
talking about
well,
walls here.
okay. I mean, any retaining wall, you better not be able to see through it. It's not going to retain much.
Hey, good point.
Well, I don't know. A lot of cities, counties, heavy wire. Hillside. Yeah, that's true. But there's rock behind those wires. So it's still, you
Big
can't,
rocks.
or they're
And
there
we-
to
and-
catch the rock. Yeah. To retain the rock.
Okay. We'll set the walls aside.
Ready to make a we need a motion on it?
No, because what we'll need to do is have a public hearing then on this as we go next, whenever. We'll have a public hearing and then any public comment and then go to council with a recommendation. Since this is a land use issue, we'll need to have a public hearing. So this is to get your thoughts and views on what to present to the public as well as ourselves as
Does
we
it
go forward.
require a public hearing or just a public meeting?
Public hearing. Yeah. Because we're changing our land use that way. That was the reason for the public hearing on Title 11 tonight, because that's a whole change to that land use part. Okay. Next thing is, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I'm confusing myself here. You're right. We did have the public hearing
Yeah,
on 10 tonight.
yeah.
So we will take a recommendation on what we've decided to go then to the council.
Crazy. Either-
So, somebody want to make a recommendation?
I'll make a recommendation to the city council on proposing amendments Title 10 Woodland Hills City Code.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Second to that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
I move that we accept the change to 10.11.8D, adding a section on retaining walls. Because that was a separate section than the definition of a wall. In the first one, the definition of the wall,
right,
10.2.1. 10.2.1, and this is,
and then what we just talked about is 10.11.8 dash D.
yeah. So I move that we approve that as well.
Okay. We'll make it separate.
I'll second that.
And we've got the other one on building official. We need a
Yeah, we
motion.
need to do that one too. So I'll take a motion
We need to discuss that.
changing building official. We're changing building inspector to building official. Motion.
I'll second.
All in favor of making that change from building inspector to building official? Voice with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next then is on Title 11. It's a lot to get through, I know. And there's a few other changes be made. The some piecemeal. Most of it is done. There's a couple other small changes that we still want to make to it.
This is working with Mike Hanson or?
Yes. The council will have the ultimate say on it. Just wondering. Yes, it could be. And what you have is a final draft, the one copy. And there's been one change made to that. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But it's not on the draft.
Is it on the red lines?
It's in that, but I can't remember what it. I think about it.
Well, most of the changes were just for clarification, right?
No, because the preliminary plat has been eliminated from the process. And we
Right.
just talked about final plat. So, but what's been changed are the processes a little bit. From what and the time constraints that are in the legislation for review. All that is follows the state code requirements.
The 10-day public hearing.
It's a 20-day, actually. They have 40 days to give us for the improvements, for us to review the subdivision improvements, the infrastructure. So,
What did they decide? I mean, I'm looking at the changes on pages. It says page 28, public hearing, public hearing, public meeting.
there's only need for one public hearing.
Right.
So are you looking at the red line or
I'm
The
just
final.
looking at the final.
what page is it on?
Page 28, paragraph 4 and 5.
Oh, boy. I don't see a 4 or 5 on my 28. Oh, it's on 27. On sections 4 and 5,
Yes,
is that what you're saying?
yes.
Subdivision improvements after recording, approved plat, and additional requirements for posted security? Are those the two that you're
Well,
referencing?
I'm
there?
just where it mentions public hearing, and the question is it intended to be a public hearing, or can it just be a public meeting? I think we've talked before about having as few hearings, not having a hearing if we don't really need one.
Okay, you're on the red line version. Says item 5, let's see, 4. Planning Commission shall hold a public hearing before approving an amendment petition within 45 calendar days after the day in which the petition is submitted, if, and it gives those two criteria. And then paragraph 5 is notwithstanding paragraph 4, the Planning Commission need not hold a public hearing if notice has been given to adjoining property owners in accordance with any applicable local ordinance and the petition seeks to, and it names A, B, C, D, E.
Right.
So, it mentions
What page are you on?
it's 28 of the red line version. It's under section 11.3.9.
Right.
Amending a subdivision. Let me look at the final here and see.
I'm on the clean one.
So I'm looking It's on page 21 of my amending it, 11.3.9.
3.9.
Public hearing. 3 says a public hearing, or 4, excuse me. 4 says a public hearing. The Planning Commission shall hold a public hearing before approving a petition to amend a subdivision, and within 45 calendar days after the day in which the petition is submitted, if those things are in place. If not, then there's no public hearing required.
Okay.
Think of a way that
According to the notes that I'm seeing, it's actually Utah law that it's actually a public hearing. It can't be a public meeting. As far as that, part of that question went. So,
if there's a public whatever, it's a public hearing, not a meeting. Like
Yeah.
our planning commission meeting, it would have to be a hearing.
Yes, and that is required by Utah code.
But I think sometimes, my experience anyway, we have a public hearing when we really don't need to.
There's been occasion for that. Tonight is an example of that with the zoning. And we've looked into that. It's a city council that holds a public hearing. We don't need to hold two public hearings for a zone change,
Right.
just one.
Right.
So the council are the ones who make the final determination. So they're the ones that'll hear from the public
Okay.
on that. So we've tried to sort through some of those situations. I think we've gotten most of them to address just that there's no point in having two public hearings on the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
So, yeah. Okay.
Takes a mighty good meeting. Be better than no meeting at all.
I've heard that about church meetings. I know there's some further changes that you need to make. I certainly can share them all with you too. I mean, not tonight, I don't have them, but when, and there may be a few, this is going to be reviewed by our attorney also. So there may be some that the attorney might suggest when he sees it. He hasn't seen it yet. So, I wonder if it's,
How do we determine if any changes made that we haven't seen, if we have to have another public hearing?
we don't need another public hearing
Okay.
because we got input, no input from the
But we
public,
gave them an opportunity.
an opportunity to have input to it. So
Well,
that
my-
part is over. And,
Well, my feeling on that is that we should approve it and with any changes that still need to be made by you or the attorney, and then hand it off to the city council.
that's what I'm
I
thinking.
don't have a problem with that
Of
at all.
doing-
That's the way to do it.
And I can let y'all know too, whatever
Sure.
those other changes were. There'll be process changes, I think. So, let's do that. Is that your motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, Larry made a motion, seconded by John, to approve it as written with the changes that have been made, with future changes that may be made
Be communicated to the,
and communicated to you all by either the attorney or this company and myself.
okay, I'm good with that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Any other comments that you have from the material?
It must be the season for Thanksgiving. Severin and I agreed on everything. Goodness, to start.
Okay, good. The next thing I want to discuss was fencing, the fencing ordinance. Severin gave us an email, pretty detailed on different aspects of it and thoughts that we've had in the past and a few things that we've considered. And what I did was take his comments and I pen and ink them into our existing ordinance and sent that to everybody. like, they're not very many. I can, did you, I think, I'm pretty sure I sent it to everybody.
I've got it.
Okay, yeah, that's what that is. Okay. We have a, let me explain a couple of them.
Got it.
We've got a process in place where basically I'm approving the fences. Rather than coming to planning commission, we do that as part of the information goes into City Inspect, which is our database for building permits, accessory buildings, fences, swimming pools, those kinds of things all go into City Inspect. And it's a way to help track the inspections that are done on those items. So I've been approving, as planning commission chair, been approving the fences that people submit to us and looking at our ordinance and following that. I don't think I've made any mistakes with the ordinance in approving fences. So that's one thing. So what I've suggested in this pen and ink change is that we change planning commission reviewers to approving authority, whoever that might be. Now, if I have questions, I'll go to maybe talk to Ted about them too, as a building official in the city. But they're pretty much straightforward with the fencing. We have people who continue to build fences without approval, and we try to stop that if we know it's happening or going on, or catch it in the middle of something. So we don't catch them all, but if we catch them, we do that. We stop it.
I will plead ignorance at this point. Have you addressed the fencing stuff in your monthly thing in the newsletter?
I don't. I haven't needed to yet with you're talking about the tally of statistics kind of thing.
Well, no,
Or in the Wayne's World comments.
Wayne's World thing.
I think I've addressed it a couple of times.
Okay.
Not necessarily that there have been violations, but about our fencing ordinances and
And
these
you
need to be
make sure you
adhered
get a
to,
permit and-
things, yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you had, but
yeah.
my memory isn't always perfect.
Here's one area under 2 of our fencing ordinance, item 2, that under type of fence. I put acceptable fence materials include, and then inserted, but are not limited to natural stone, wood, vinyl coated chain link, wire, and wrought iron. So that I think we're going to find is probably basically used, but I've added but are not limited to. And if I feel that it meets the sort of the spirit of the law, then I'll approve it. If not, then I won't. So
It's that next sentence.
yes, masonry and concrete may be used for fence posts or pillars only.
Do we really want to say that?
Well, we get some of these, like line the road. Those are concrete, I think, aren't they?
Well, some are.
So-
Some are
composite.
composite, but
Yeah.
a lot of them are concrete.
So I think that's hard to object to. It's the same size and everything, so,
Up here, we would not allow that because it's right next to the road.
not to the road.
But
On the back,
down here, the backside, it
Yeah.
would seem to me that I don't see why we would have a problem with that kind of a concrete fence. So not just the posts, but in between the posts could also be concrete.
well, we can add those two. to the type of fences that are part of the previous sentence. And then maybe add masonry and concrete may be used for fence posts. Or fence posts or pillars, scratch only.
Yeah,
So people know that those are options if they choose to use them. And then at the end of that paragraph, which is paragraph A, I've got the approving authority can approve other fence materials. Because there's quite often, particularly with down in Four Seasons, somebody comes up with something that's not here. And there's a new composite now of something. It's not vinyl, it's not plastic. They're putting a fence together today that I approve. So I've added that part, that something else is available, somebody comes forth with it, and it's an offense material, then we can approve that. And down on number 6, permit requirements, I've taken out planning commission in A and just put city. It says, except as exempted in paragraph B6C, no fence shall be constructed without a permit from the city instead of planning commission.
Said Surrey.
And then 1 underneath A is the same thing. Application to the city for permits, a fence permit shall be made to the city recorder. So the rest is substituting city for planning commission and approving authority for planning commission reviewers. And then at the very end of our fencing ordinance, item 8, all other requirements contained in 10-11-8 sections, then it'll be sections 2 through 8, not 6, 7, and 8. Applying sections 2, 3, 4, and 5, 2 through 8, of the fencing ordinance shall be complied with. So there's other elements that are pulling into those requirements. And I think that was maybe from Corbett or from Severin's comments. Number 9, no barbed wire, strand wire, or uncoated chain link fences is approved to use. I've had several comments about just raw chain link, we shouldn't have that. So that's why I put uncoated.
so,
So chain link,
yeah,
bare wire chain link can't be used, but coated chain link can be used.
so, wasn't there somewhere in here before?
Yes,
Maybe it's still there, that says we can't use vinyl slats in chain link.
correct. And I've left that in there.
Okay, it's still there.
Yeah.
Well, the one question just came to my mind, I hadn't even thought about this before. What about fences around the agricultural zone?
There's a lot of flexibility with those.
I mean, barbed wire is normal for agricultural lands. I mean, when you've got cows and horses.
Are you talking beyond a garden?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
You're
talking
talking
about hanks.
oh,
Animal
okay.
retention.
Which they need.
Yeah,
We need to accept agricultural zones.
now, maybe, what I've done at the end of the sentence on 9, said for approved fence material, CB to A of this title. Maybe we need to do it, except for agricultural land, agricultural fenced land, allow barbed wire to be used. I
It's
think that's,
already there. If we just say agricultural zones, or there's only one agricultural zone, isn't there?
Is it city or is it county?
It's city.
It's city.
it's city.
It's a city.
Oh, is it? We probably better say something. When an add a fence.
I mean, the only thing that that is not in the city boundary now
No, it is.
is Nadine.
Oh,
She's still county.
She's still county.
yeah. I don't know that she's
But
got,
Hyatt's
barbed wire.
are in
yeah.
now. And so it's just that one piece of Nadine's. It's not, she's still county.
Yeah. I think she'll eventually come in, but she didn't want to come in now.
I know. She doesn't like taxes.
Taxes.
But we don't either.
I don't blame her.
But
Yeah.
I'd make my county.
So I'll put that agriculture zone. Now, these things we're talking about fences, we will, it's not, they're other business tonight. So we will have a public hearing on this, present this and for approval, continued approval by us and by the city. So is that,
I think,
have I
so.
addressed those
Yeah,
issues that you had there, Severin?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll have a public hearing on those then, before we make a recommendation to the council. And the last discussion item is building height. People do not understand the ordinance that we crafted as much attention.
mathematician roused it all up.
Hey.
Nobody understands what a plane is.
I need to go back to high school then.
That's how.
Um, This ordinance that I sent to you all used to be the Park City ordinance,
Yeah, I remember.
Oh,
and they've changed it to, they've convoluted it.
really?
I've read it 3 or 4 times and I'm still not sure I understand it. But this seemed to be pretty clear to me, the way that it was written, and its closeness to what we have, except we don't have the reference line. And in most, probably 90% of the time, the lowest line is the natural line. It's not the finished grade line. So even though that's been said, oftentimes they come in and they've used the finished grade line for trying to calculate the building height. The natural line, they oftentimes take it beyond the footprint. And what we get most often, though, is a stepped natural line instead of a straight line from the lowest to the highest point of the natural grade. They step it. And wherever the tall part of the structure is, they come down to that line. Wherever it's however stepped, and so it throws it off. And they draw these 2 parallel lines and they don't follow it. It's frustrating for us, and Ted helps with some of this, reviewing the building height. They don't get it right. And we ask them to show by calculation. Sometimes the calculations are in elevation feet. Sometimes they're not. And it's hard. And then we have the added issue with what we got started down in Four Seasons with having a spot on the curb for elevation. Because Robert, his practice is to take topsoil off of the lot. And so when and then if they want it, he sells it back to them. But sometimes there's much as 2 or 3 feet of topsoil taken off. And usually when the developer does the curb and gutter down there, which we don't have ditches or curbs, or they'll mark it, then we've been using that because that's generally at natural grade level. Not always. And there we run into further issues, but and there's going to be more of that when that R19 land develops. We're going to get probably curb and gutter elevations. They'll be readily available, and that's something that Corbett worked out when Robert was first selling the lots down there. He agreed to accept a curb and marking on the curb, and that generally has been then because the flatland, the general elevation, not always, but anyway, I'm trying to think through something to not completely throw out what we did, but see if what I proposed here, what Park City had, if that would work for what we're trying to do. And the point of it all is you pick the highest point of the building and you come straight down to the natural grade. And that's your height of your building.
Now, why do we want natural grade instead of finished grade?
Because natural usually is the lowest.
Yeah, but why not go with
Because
finished?
then it puts it up higher. It puts the building up taller. It's natural grade, it puts the building down more. And that's, we don't want to give an impression of big, tall homes. So that's a reason for choosing the lowest. And that's why we picked the ordinance wording that we did, pick the lowest line, because that causes the home to be set lower and required to be set lower to meet the 35-foot height limit.
What if they're building off of the hill? They want a driveway that's flat and it requires 2 or 3 stories under the ground. Get it to that height. Are we going to require them to bring a retaining wall up to that and not have the other stories underground? Or because if
We've got one who raised the garage 5 feet and to get the
to
slope.
get the slope
the right
for the
slope.
driveway
Yeah.
and everything else,
Yeah.
this is a tough one for the city, I think. Everything's a slope.
Mhm.
It's either sloping off or sloping
It
up or
pretty
sloping
much is.
across or
Now, with the new R119, whenever that develops, those will lose a lot of that slope. That land down there.
well, they mitigate that with the roads and the different things where they change the contours. So we're up here, it's more just a natural.
Yes, it continues to be an
You know,
issue
and
up here.
as I think about up here and quote, natural grade, was it really the natural grade when the roads were put in? Or did they move dirt around when they were creating the roads? And then just over the years, vegetation has grown up, and so we think it's the natural grade.
Yeah, we don't
but maybe it isn't. Whereas down in Four Seasons, since there is no vegetation, you know, just moving the dirt around, building the roads, it's kind of obscured what the natural grade was.
It does. Ted has mentioned to me that there's an engineer philosophy that if dirt's been left in place for 7 years, that's the natural grade.
Okay, and that would make sense for us here, but not down there.
No, yeah. But I think most of it up here probably hasn't been disturbed significantly like that with changing a natural grade. So I think it is what it is. It's been a long time, natural
I-
grade.
I think, I don't know this for sure, but our wonderful nemesis, I think, was going after my house and saying that it exceeded 35 feet at one point. I didn't point it.
Yeah.
But I told him, if you want to see him, I'll show him to you. I'll let you look at him.
The goal is to try to get it so we don't have a home that doesn't look like it's part of the natural setting of the lots and everything else. Cause you see that all the time where somebody builds a flat lot and wants to have a view, so they
I mean,
change grades to make that work and whatever else is happening all around us.
we had an issue because the ordinance, before we changed it, said, you know, from the E. And there were some, like the one up on Eagle Nest and the one down in Four Seasons, that had 2 eaves at different heights.
Yeah.
And so they were measuring from the one that was more advantageous to them. That's why
It did need to be changed, that
Yeah,
one. It was
so we
just
fixed that.
too subjective, with the wording of it.
So in like Four Seasons, in places I've built in the past where they have curb gutter sidewalks, they've kind of taken that, they do it from a property corner, or they would call that the 100 or the 0 line. The height would go from there. That's,
What did that point consist of? Is that a
that
natural
point
grade?
was, no,
No?
that was a man-made set grade after the subdivision was completed. Then they will give you a pin marking the corner of the lot in the curb and gutter or the sidewalk. That's your 100. So that's your starting point from that 35 feet.
What? Help me understand better. That point, how did they come about to that point? What was significant about that point, or was it arbitrary?
It's arbitrary because you think about it, it's so after the civil engineering is all done, you're making with those type of subdivisions, you have all those topo maps to have the water run through the subdivision, run around the homes, and because they're so close together, there's a lot of grading and drainage issues, things like that. So they were established after that was civil engineering was done. And after that point, when they went back to mark property lines, is where they would hit that pin. That was your point of 0.
That's probably what was done down in Four Seasons with
I would guess it
that
would
mark on the curb,
be. Right.
as a reference point.
So top backside of curb, that's
Yeah.
where you start. Look there.
Well, it seems like in some of the places in Four Seasons, they've put in a cul-de-sac, had to do a lot of grading because you've got a hill, and just to make it buildable for both sides of the cul-de-sac, they've had to level it, do a lot of grading there. And then they should count that as the natural grade and have this come up, not from how it was off the office before.
Well, and Robert compounded the problem because it's after the cul-de-sac and the roads are in, and he goes in and scrapes the ground from the tops, takes the topsoil off. So that even causes, further, the house to sit down further below the curb in some instances.
And
So,
that ought to make the house shorter.
I kind of think sometimes it might
Because
be
if
too
the-
short.
except they started marking
Point
a
is
curb.
at the curb,
Right.
and the foundation is now below the curb. And point here to here is 35 feet.
And that's what they're measuring for the height of the home.
Yeah.
That's what Corbett agreed to do with them down there. So it kind of basically started at just a little bit above road level, where the curb was going around there, marked the curb. And from that measurement then to the top, and that's the 35 feet. They don't use reference lines.
Even if it slopes down to the driveway or into the garage, they're using that as the reference.
At one point,
So then it looks like a 45 foot.
Could be.
it can, and there's some pretty tall
It
looking
could be.
homes down
Yeah,
there.
there's some tall dudes.
I wonder if maybe we ought to abandon natural grade and just say the grade is the grade after subdivision has been approved or after construction of the subdivision has been finished.
The infrastructure, the
Yeah.
improvements.
Yeah, all the infrastructure, curb gutter, or in our case up here, ditch, grading, slopes of the city easement. Then we establish,
What do we do up here without curb and gutter?
well, we still could put a pin in that cement. Like, take my lot on Loafer, if we came down and we said, okay, from this point here, we'd have to have somebody look at them. It's not something that you could just,
I mean, it's really.
you'd really have to,
It needs
each
to
one
be
would
in the
almost be
building
special.
footprint, if we're gonna do that. Because like your house, if it was down where the road is.
I'm way out of over
Yeah.
violating the whole thing. And same with Wayne's and yours, we'd all be in trouble.
Yeah,
Because the slope of the street's so extreme.
Yeah. You're what, 10 feet above the road maybe?
Oh, easy. Yeah, not on the bottom part of it, I think I am 16 feet. Bottom of it.
but he's only got one story, really.
I'm a rambler.
Yeah.
His is fine. Mine's the one, I've got a second story.
But your house is lower than his.
Yeah, I can see
Two.
over his roof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my driveway just goes straight in, basically, straight in from the road.
The way that we've been doing it, I think has worked fine for what we're doing up here, but it is convoluted in areas that have reestablished grades. They're not necessarily the grade that was there, but it's a
No, that's right.
reestablished grade. I can see that being a problem.
And that's why down at Four Seasons, to me, the natural grade ought to just be thrown out. Yeah. It's too hard. How do you determine what the natural grade was in each one of those lots?
And it makes sense to have a gutter, back of gutter pinned or, that as the homes.
Well, maybe that would
Well, that could
stop Robert from stealing and taking the topsoil away.
Oh,
Say, look,
that's
this is
genius.
where it's ventured from, it's here.
He's not
You
making
take
my own
topsoil
laws.
away, you're gonna violate the 35-foot limit.
So that can be calculated, Wayne, when they do the topo maps. Ted would know how to do that, you know what I'm saying? The civil engineer would know how to set that point.
Yes, for down there.
If we're down in those situations.
Yeah.
But what would happen in Summit Creek?
A disaster.
Yeah, that, it
Well,
just,
then Summit's-
But in those, some of those areas where they're doing the smaller lots, those could be calculated. Because it's so small, it just takes the footprint, makes it smaller.
Right. I mean, Summit is really more like up here.
yeah.
It is. Well, it is like up here. They just have the ditches.
And, you know, you look at those, like the lots next to the Mission House that are just starting to be built on. I mean, that is a natural grade. I mean, the underbrush there is old stuff.
Would the explanation that Park City used to have, would that work up here to a degree? I mean, to me, it's much more clear. People don't understand reference line at all.
I mean, when we were having this discussion, we actually had spent a few days in Port City. And as I walked around the city, I could understand why they had their height definition the way they did. Because they'd have one road here, they'd have another road up here,
Yeah.
and there would be building a house in between the two roads.
Yep.
And so it was a very high point to a very low point.
And a very small lot.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what we're seeing in Summit Creek.
It is.
I mean, those ones that are next to the Mission House, the access is gonna be that road up behind,
Yeah,
not, you know, they're gonna have to enter from up there, not from,
and those will be probably the smallest lots they have in
yeah.
their subdivision. Well, give us some thought to
It's a head
this
scratcher.
and see what, maybe an answer is to have a different computation for low and up here.
If we
Way
got a
up.
copy of the old Park City stuff,
What's that?
you got a copy of the old? Park
Yes.
City
Is that
ordinance?
an
It's in this email that I sent
Oh, is it?
on
Okay.
October 17th. It was
That's
actually
the one
addressed to
thing I didn't get printed out.
Ted and Jody, but I
Okay.
sent it to you all.
Yeah.
I
It's
think,
still complicated, I think. It
but
would be
not as
nice
much
to-
as the one we have now. Anything would be an
It's,
improvement.
we
I
don't
think.
think it's that complicated, do we?
Well, and people are still submitting, are they still submitting an overall picture of how it's supposed to look? Are we getting any of that?
They draw
where
the picture that's in the,
They just take the
and
plan
that's all.
and then they just put colors on it.
Yeah,
That
and then
doesn't
they
work.
just, they don't even pay the reference line is nothing.
Seems like you could get something more accurate that would be the actual.
Well, you'd expect that. I mean, they've got a lot there. I think most of the property you can find topography maps.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
so
If
you
not,
could
that's-
see the highest and the lowest
Well, what if we
points
have,
wherever that house is.
what are the we don't have civil requirements for that, like cuts and fills and things like
No.
that. Maybe we have them
Well, only
build a
on
topo. I mean, it's cheap.
steep slopes.
Yeah,
But if we
That
had
would
them
be
build a topo, we could get an idea. With the drone, you fly them and you can get a topo map we could have submitted, an actual.
maybe that's part of the key with the topography map
So,
to have that.
Then all you really have to do is superimpose the building footprint
Right.
on the top of the property map. Say, okay, this is your high point, this is your low point, and so you draw a line between the two and measure straight down from the peak to where it hits that line, and it can't be more than 35 feet.
Could you say that every part of the house has to be a maximum of 35 feet above the ground, the grade, just anywhere in the house?
We say that no part of the house could be more than 35
Yeah,
feet.
well, but could you just say that? And okay, here's your, whatever your grade is, and when you decide if it's after the
Most
subdivision
of them
has been
take
done.
So we're
a
just,
finish grade.
Okay, and that's bad because then they would pile dirt up and make the house taller?
Well, it'll be taller. The house, instead of being a couple of feet down to the ground with this reference line, it's gonna usually be on the surface where that top of the foundation is. That's kind of where they're gonna measure from to see if any part of it is taller. The reference lines aren't being utilized the way they were intended.
Can't you say your house that can't be taller than 35 feet above the grade? No part of the house, doesn't matter where you measure straight down, anywhere in the house. it can't be more than 35.
I think that's what our
Yeah,
drawing
that's what it is
shows.
currently.
Yeah,
Well, for commercial building, we have to give a rendering of how it's going to look on the lot. It has to match the landscaping, it has to meet the topo, so it's all one piece, but that gets way more expensive and very complicated.
Yeah.
And I think people might balk at that.
Well, our
pretty good.
permits are lower than.
Put it in. Make it-
Huh.
maybe having more defined topography maps. Be helpful.
Well, then you can kind of see where the existing grades are, and you can see kind of where they're gonna put the house.
Yeah,
What
you'd
that
think that
mark
they
is at
would
that
do
point,
that,
and it's
you
cheap.
know?
They could fly them for less than $100, and most of the civil guys drawing these plans anyway have that technology.
Hmm.
I did it on mine just because I wanted to see how much dirt I had to haul
Maybe we
away.
need to be more specific with them. Providing that information in detail to us. Rather than the haphazard way that we've been getting it.
again, I think we're some part of
I think we lost your mic there. I'm not hearing anything.
said, they would have to haul out 125 truckloads, they ended up hauling out 600.
See, this would have been a benefit to him.
And so, I mean,
He
and
would have
the
known.
retaining, yeah, you've got,
Yeah.
I think, 4 levels of retaining wall from south. We've got 4 levels.
Yeah. Well, we
I just had one thought, that maybe this is something we can think about. That, if we had a more specific actual paper that says, this is how you calculate the building height. One, measure the high point, tell us what the elevation is of the high point on your building perimeter. What is the low point in feet around your building perimeter? Draw a line between the high point and the low point. Step 3, measure from the peak straight down to where that intersects that reference line. How far is that? That is the height of your house.
well, we're halfway there with the instructions now, but I admit they probably could be more clear, and maybe that's one of the keys, is a step by step, and so that they don't miss any of that and start
Yeah,
guessing at something.
I think that they may understand it, but they're trying to get taller houses.
They are.
I
I mean-
think it's
Yeah,
purposely trying to get it taller.
I mean, we know from looking at the plans that are submitted, there are elevations all the way around that building. The way the flood is, so it's not hard
No, they could
to
figure that
find out what the high point is and what the low point is.
Well, a lot of the builders that I've talked to that have come in, they say that it's really hard to build the house that they want as short as we want. And
Go somewhere else.
yeah, I've heard that several times. And they've said that they've lost customers because they want a taller house.
I've told Wayne this story. When we lived in Northern California, Lafayette's building height regulations was called a ridge line. And if you build a house, you looked at the lowest point on the street that you were there, and if you looked up, then the top of that house could not exceed the ridge line of the hills around. And we had some friends that were building a house. They lowered their roof so many times just so that, because they were living up a little hill, and down at the bottom, the city would go down to the bottom. No, it's too high. Gotta lower it some more. No, too high. Gotta lower it some more. Because it could not be above the ridge line of the hills around.
That is a
sounds like
subjective.
California.
Is the ridge line where the mayor looks out of his house and looks
Yeah.
down?
Yeah, they send a different
At the
person
view.
out that's shorter or taller.
Anyway, this is a lot easier than that.
Okay, well, you've given me some good things to think about here, so I appreciate the discussion.
I move that we close planning commission meeting.
Okay, is there
Second
a
it.
second to that? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks for all you guys do.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate your input.